All right, it's Wednesday, July 19th. This is an end of the day SPY recap, and today we end up with a two up, kind of an indecision neutral bar. Took out the highs of the previous day, closed right around the open, didn't really follow through the upside, didn't really fail in any way relative to this bar. We stayed above the midpoint all day, but you could see going into tomorrow now, it's the first day where we could possibly start our pullback if we get a two down bar and we have this fair value gap in here between the high of Monday's bar and the low of today's bar. We can come down to that level as a target somewhere in here. If we start lower, going into today, we were expecting the highs to be taken out. We were always conscious of some failure because we're at exhaustion risk going up all these days in a row. But the failure would have to occur if you kind of take out yesterday's high and then come down through the midpoint of that bar. So anyway, we were biased to the upside all day, knowing we're at exhaustion risk. If we go to the structure of the day, it was a very choppy day. First of all, the opening bar went up very strong, and you're already kind of at exhaustion risk from the previous day. So, we then paused on bar two. So if you want to buy bar three here, it's something I wasn't really interested in, but it's a technical signal and you kind of want to see some kind of immediate follow through. Typically, when I see a gap up like this, from yesterday and then a big gap up and a big green bar, instead of going with the momentum, I'd rather kind of see, it go up, maybe pull back to the halfway point and then do a secondary buy to kind of test the highs of the day, just confirming, that the trend is still going to be up for the day. But anyway, if not, then you kind of bought here. You had one bar, it went up, you immediately had indecision. So that should show you right out of, next bar that this could be a tricky, kind of a play, trying to play momentum right here on bar number three. Then you kind of held here on bar number four. It didn't really go anywhere, and again, just showing you're not getting that momentum. But the stop is usually the halfway point of that first bar, so then you get the next bar coming down, but you had that green reversal. So there was your opportunity right there to think, okay, this next bar needs to come up and immediately take out those highs to confirm that uptrend. And what happened was it immediately came down. So if you were going to take a trade up here, you had to get stopped out for a small loss right here. Obviously, the market then, in very volatile nature, came down, took out the the intraday lows, not the pre-market lows, and then immediately had a big buying tail, and then started its choppiness. Where, if you even want to look at it, once we took out the first bar low, you weren't really holding the midpoint of that bar. If for some reason you just felt that was taking out stops, and you saw this inside green bar, you wanted to buy that. Well, you had that, and your first target was the high of the day. So you did kind of within an hour get up there to take that out, but then it immediately failed again. So at that point, the only potential short trade was after this big red bar coming down, failing on two attempts to move up past the first bar high. You kind of were anticipating taking out the intraday low and maybe the pre-market lows once this red bar formed. And ultimately, it did come down and take out the day, intraday lows, and then again bounced up strong. But then we kind of fell back and had that whole neutral look to the day. So in the end, it's just a situation where the weekly chart's still green and heading up. We still have our bigger picture targets up here, but we're expecting, you're at exhaustion risk. And in terms of, tomorrow, we could see whether we have a two down day, or maybe, we come down, take out the low of that bar, and then start up through the midpoint of that bar and continue up strong for the rest of the week. Also, another thing today is you have Tesla and Netflix earnings, so I think the market's waiting on that. That could have a big influence on tomorrow's price action. So that's why it's a little tricky, trying to trade momentum today, knowing the market's waiting for that information and, at the close here. Finally, if I just go through the board, the stocks that to me looked worthy of trading. I tried to trade Amazon today. I actually took a small loss, but as it turned out, that just stayed neutral and moved up most of the day, holding the midpoint of the first day. And again, the reason I would look at that stock was I saw a two up here on the daily chart that had targets up here. So that's why, I focused on that one a little bit at the opening. Also, Meta was a good one. If you look at it, on the daily chart, context-wise, if you're going to come up and get a good opening, at least you have these targets up here. And I didn't trade that stock, but it's just an example. That one went up, kind of held the midpoint, that first bar, and then made that push up to those targets I was discussing. So when you look around and want to pick individual stocks, these are the top stocks to look for. And they, they all kind of held up today, even though they didn't follow through all that strongly because the SPY itself, had a whole choppy look to it. So we will see going into tomorrow, if we do finally get a little bit of a pullback. A lot might depend on those earnings that are announced today. So we'll see what happens, but we'll get the pre-market range as always in the opening price action and see, how that relates to how this day will unfold. But at least we have a kind of an actionable signal after maybe broadening out to the upside and getting a 2 down bar to fill in some gaps. We have that to the downside here. But if we fail, if we come down a little bit and take out those lows and can't follow through and then come up through the midpoint of that bar, we're still heading up to our bigger picture target. So let's see what unfolds tomorrow. And again, maybe a lot of that tomorrow will depend on what earnings come out on Netflix and Tesla and some of the other stocks today.